I'm not.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We have our first speaker here today. This webinar is on using research to add to your bottom line. Um, we'll, Jim will provide insight into how market research can not only help in making strategic decisions, but also add to your bottom line. Jim will share real world project experience and how using the insight gained has driven product development and message refinement. Of course, we can't be here today without our sponsors, and Jim Jager with New South Research is a sponsor. They worked with us to do our AAF research last year that helped us develop our membership action plan. Little air meat housekeeping. Remember comments and questions. You have the two tabs over to the right. If you have a question for Jim, be sure to put it in the questions tab. I'll be watching both the chat and the questions tab during the session, and we'll respond to Jim anything that comes through. And a little bit about Jim. He has been involved in market research since 1990. During that time, he has been involved in thousands of research projects in a wide variety of industries, including healthcare, retail, finance, fitness, clothing, communication, advertising, and jury research. His blended experience of both qualitative and quantitative methods brings a unique perspective to each research opportunity. So, welcome and good morning, Jim. I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the chance to be here and talk to y'all. I can sit here and I would far rather be in person. I think probably everyone would be, and probably
We all would be for sure.
Probably some location other than where any of us are. But if I was in person, I'd ask a lot of questions and try to get some feedback from you. I will ask a few questions for you to ponder along the way. You can answer in chat if you want, or just ponder the question. If you have a question as I go along, please do post it. I'd rather have some engagement and answer your questions about some specific things I bring up or things you're wondering about around research. Once I share my screen, I will not be able to see the chat, but Lee will stay with us and help me remember and see that the questions popped up. So let me give you an overview. Get in here and share screen. Here we go. I'll give you a little bit of background on my company. I'm not going to do a lot here. Company's been around 50 years. No, I did not start it. A lady actually started it at her kitchen table back in the late 1960s. She actually passed away very, very recently. Got about 40 employees. As Lee already touched on, the thing that makes what we do really interesting and enjoyable is we get to touch a lot of different industries, a lot of different companies. Over the course of my career, I've been to 43 states. I like to say that when I get the next 7 done, I can retire. No one sent me to Hawaii yet, so we're not there. But it does make it interesting, the fact that we get to touch on so many different things and learn about so many different things. The thing that makes our company a little different is we do both qualitative and quantitative research. I think that's a strength, that it helps us to assess the project and say what works best, as opposed to come at it and say, hey, we do qualitative research, we do in-depth research, so that's what's probably best here. I promise not to bore you long with the words qualitative or quantitative, but on the qualitative front, what we do is in-depth interviews, which may be a one-on-one interview in person, online, or on telephone. The in-person certainly has not been frequently as of the past year. Focus groups, in person or online. I got the fun of doing focus groups yesterday with 7th through 12th graders, all in one group. And if you imagine the age of a 7th and the age of a 12th, it was challenging, but it was fun. Got to meet some nice kids. We do bulletin boards where we may be posting questions over time, and I'll show you some results from one of those in a few minutes. Over the course of a week to 10 days, we may do a bulletin board where we post questions, very much like a focus group. And then we do mock trials where we help attorneys present their case to trial jurors and see what the reactions are. On the quantitative front, we do telephone surveys. I have a call center, a staffed call center of my own. And yes, I would say that telephone surveys are not dead. They're not gone away yet. In spite of all the blocking devices, some people still do talk to us on the phone. And in fact, one of the benefits of the pandemic is people actually have talked on their phones more. They're at home working, so they're willing to answer the call while they're at home working. Online surveys, exit or intercept interviews, where we may be standing outside of somewhere and exit, as people exit, do an interview with them. And then we do what's called a pre-recruited central location test, which we recruit people to come to a certain location, and typically that is a taste test type thing. So how can research help? How can research help you with your day-to-day, and how can research maybe help bring some money to your bottom lines? My first question for you to ponder is, what sank the Titanic? I like to ask this question and think about what the answers might be as to actually what caused the Titanic to sink. I've actually been, way before the movie, I started reading about the Titanic many, many years ago. Most people, when I ask the question, say, well, an iceberg. The obvious answer is water. The other answer that I hear sometimes is bad steel, which was the report for a long time. And all of those factors certainly contributed. But the thing that I think really caused the Titanic to sink was they ignored information that would have redirected their course. There was information there was data, there was research there, and they ignored it. They knew there were ice warnings. They knew the other ships that were traveling where they were had stopped, because back in 1912, you couldn't see ahead beyond what your eyes could see. They ignored that. They ignored those ice warnings. They didn't have the tools back then to see far ahead. The guy in the crow's nest did not have his binoculars with him. So he didn't have the right tools again to study what the future was going to bring them. And so when he finally saw the iceberg, it was too late. And he radioed the helm. The helm delayed a matter of seconds that would have made a difference because they barely hit the iceberg. And again, they've avoided or not used the research they had. But the thing that most people don't know is there was a boat there that watched them sink. Less than 10 miles away, there was a boat that watched the Titanic sink and found out the next morning that it had sunk. So why did they watch? They misread the information they had. They saw the lights going down as the boat sank and thought the boat was moving away on the horizon. They saw the flares the Titanic was shooting, the distress signal flares, and they misread those as fireworks. And so ultimately, you probably wouldn't even know about the Titanic if it wasn't for the fact they ignored research they had, they didn't research correctly, and they misread some of what they had. So that's why the Titanic sank. How can it affect your bottom line? How can research make a difference and affect your bottom line? It can help with new product development. It can help with brand extensions, pathways to purchase, more effective targeting, effects of media, monitoring your market position so you know where you are today and so therefore where you need to go or where you've been, identifying new customers, and message refinement. I'll give you a touch of a project for each one of these and hopefully share with you how we learned something from each of these different types of things that ultimately, when research was applied, they were able to add to their bottom line or avoid losing some money on their bottom line. One more background. What's the most important? What is the most important part of research? When you're doing market research, what is the one thing you have to make sure you get right? Is it the sample? Is it the people you talk to? Is it the survey tool or the discussion guide? Or is it the smart people on the back end that are doing the analysis. My argument after way too many years of doing this is most of the time I hear it's the analysis. They think of the people with the PhDs and examining statistics, and that's the hardest part. That's the most important. My answer would be, if you get any one of those three wrong, you have bad research. If I go out and I need to talk to men who wear a certain type of jeans, and I get men who wear a different type of jeans, I've got the wrong audience. If I need to check brand awareness for something and I call a market that brand is not in, I know what the awareness is going to be. So I got to get the audience correct. If the tool is designed wrong, then you're going to have bad questions asked to the right audience. Again, you come out with a bad result. And if the analysis is biased, if the analysis is trying to look for a specific point it wants to make, then the analysis is not fair as well, or can be missed. So my argument is, research, if you don't get all three of those correct, research can be more misleading than helpful. A few case studies that I'll share that hopefully will give you some insight in how we've used research and how those specific pieces of research have helped clients add to their bottom line, help clients develop new products, help clients understand their positioning. Where was the opportunity? Wrangler blue jeans, owned by a company called VF Jeanswear, which is the largest clothing manufacturer in the world, had identified that they thought there was an opportunity for a brand of jeans that was specific to work. And by work, I mean trades, plumbers, carpenters, electricians, pipe fitters, typically men who get dirty at work, who have some specific needs. They thought there would be specific needs within this market. So first, what they did is they assessed the size of the market. Before we were involved in the project, they assessed it and went out and tried to see, okay, how big is the market? They decided the market was big enough. So then what they hired us to do was to go talk to tradespeople, well, not all men, but it was mostly men, about their jeans and about their pants. It was primarily jeans, but there was others. There was painters' pants in the mix. And what it was that was a struggle in their jeans, what it was that made their jeans wear out. Where did their jeans fit wrong? Where did their jeans need some features that might help build a brand around? Behind the initial product, Wrangler went out and developed test product. And we then recruited people in multiple states to go wear the jeans. So in the focus groups, we learned what they needed. And the next step of the project, we developed, we actually did some interviews in homes and looked at jeans and looked at different folks' clothes and their work clothes. We also then placed the jeans, the test product jeans, with men across the country and did diaries. We would call them, or they would go online and fill out a diary about the experience wearing the test product. And they got to keep the test product. They also got paid for their time in doing it. And then behind that piece, we used all of the research for them to develop positioning statements and understand where was the proper positioning in the brand. One funny story that happened on this project, we were in a guy's home doing some in-depth interviews at home about his jeans. And the first thing he tells us is, well, you know, I hadn't worn jeans for about the past 5 or 6 years. And he looks at his wife and says, can I tell him why? And she said, yeah, go ahead and tell him. He said, well, I just got out of prison a month ago for armed robbery. So I've been in prison for 5 years, and I really didn't wear jeans for those 5 years, but now I'm wearing them again. So we're like, okay, here we are. We're in his home. Nice man, had a great interview. We asked, he lived on a little farm. We asked for him to let us go outside and see his farm where he worked around his farm. And we were videotaping. I was videotaping his farm. And he, as we move around video, and he finally got really upset and told me to stop. And I apologized. It wasn't real clear why he had told me to stop, but he said, "You can't film that." And he had a very large marijuana garden in his backyard, very large. And that is why he wanted us to stop. But that's the kind of funny stories, the funny interactions we get to do when we come around research. So Wrangler took all we learned. And in this stage, what we were trying to do is understand some of the needs and get to know the customer. What is it that challenges them in their genes? If you think about these tradespeople, they squat, they lean over, they stretch, they climb ladders. There's a lot of movement. And because they squat and go up and down a lot, they tend to have bigger thighs. And so one of the things they learned is to make the thighs bigger in the jeans for this particular brand. They hang things on their belt loops. So we learned, make sturdier belt loops. They need pockets everywhere. They don't like cargo pants, but they need pockets to stick things in. But when they stick screwdrivers and pliers in pockets, they poke holes in pockets. So they needed reinforced pockets. They're often on their knees. So they need something to double the fabric in the knees. So they would put on the inside an extra fabric layer in the knee. All different features. They also learned a little brad they put by the pocketing can cause scratching and scratch things. So as we got to know the customer, they were able to identify unique features they could build into the jeans that would make it a better product for these tradesmen. And that was all done through using research and then using the wear test. As I mentioned, there was also the piece of positioning. And it's really what's interesting with some of the words of some of the guys. If you buy a pair of jeans that is comfortable, it becomes a tool. So the jeans are like another tool. They would tell you that if your jean didn't work well all day and work with you, it was like having a bad screwdriver or a broken screwdriver. How a guy moves, my jeans are my second skin, and that is how I want them to move. They're tough and comfortable, and they move the way I do. If you can bend and turn without pulling this or adjusting that, it's a beautiful day. So identify the opportunities in the new product. Wrangler developed a brand, released the brand, sold the brand. They added to their bottom line. Where are brand extension opportunities? Some of you probably know this brand, Dale's Seasoning. It's the marinade that you put on beef, chicken, or steak. Well, beef, chicken, or pork. And what they wanted to understand is, are there other products they could make? They have the low salt version and the primary historic version, but they thought maybe they could extend their brand. Where they actually started, that most people don't know, was a salad dressing. They were famous for a salad dressing in a restaurant in Birmingham, Alabama, called Dale's many years ago. So in testing the salad dressing, we identified, testing some possible salad dressing, we identified there might be a brand extension opportunity with steak sauce itself. So they took that information, they went out and developed a test product. And we taste tested that particular test product by recruiting people who we knew liked Dale's, people who we knew liked what would be the competitive flavor, to taste this new sauce on beef, chicken, and pork. They came to our office, we fed them samples. They did not know what they were tasting. It was a blind taste test, so they wouldn't have the affinity for it because they knew they liked it like Dale's ahead of time. And Dale's used that information to then go develop the flavor profile of the steak sauce. What we learned in the salad dressing was Dale's had a pretty wide, among its loyal customer base, a pretty wide opening to be able to create some other products along their flavor profile. And so it was in one step of the research of another project, we identified the opportunity for the steak sauce. And then one important point we wanted in the taste test that I would say is really important is we wanted an established brand to compare to. So we would have some baseline. We have an established brand that's successful, and we would have some baseline to compare our sauce to. Ultimately, what they did is if you go to the grocery store, hopefully y'all can see that and I have it positioned correctly on the camera, you can buy a steak sauce from Dale's. Flavor profile is probably similar to A1. But again, they use research to identify the brand extension opportunity. They use research to help develop the flavor profile that has now become the product. And they're selling it on the shelf. You can go buy it in grocery stores now. So research helped them see their brand extension opportunities. What's the pathway to purchase? FFO Home Furniture, it's actually in the Midwest, a furniture brand out in the Midwest across Oklahoma, a little bit in Mississippi and Memphis area, but small penetration there. They wanted to understand how it is shoppers come to buy in their store, or how do they come to the purchase process when buying furniture. They were budget challenged. I could have developed a very large research project around this question. They also needed multiple markets. They needed people from multiple cities, and they needed different user types. They needed people that were their shoppers and people who shopped competitors. So the plan we ultimately developed that helped them get down their pathway to purchase was an online bulletin board. We went and posted questions, again, over the course of about 2 weeks. We would post a couple of questions. People would have a couple of days to answer. We would post more questions, and we would respond to what they were saying in a give and take, just in an online format. We had females who were furniture buyers, and we had their shoppers and some non-shoppers. And over that time, we talked them through it was actually a very large number of different topics. Again, trying to understand what do we need to do to influence their pathway to purchase to shop FFO Home and buy an FFO Home. Some of it was about the user experience. Some of it was about the website. One of the pieces we learned and saw wasn't a lot of surprise on this one, but where do they get inspiration? Where do they get influenced about the types of furniture they want? TV, the explosion over the past few years of the HGTV world and home redo shows was a significant source of inspiration. Family and friends going over to their friend's house and thinking, oh, my house doesn't look as good as their house looks. I need to go fix my house now. Online, just Googling and blogs, magazines, going in store, going online, shopping, and print ads. People were still looking at your Ashley ad you may get or your Rooms to Go ad and looking at those that come in the mail or come stuffed in the newspaper. All of those things gave people inspiration. All of those things they said were influential in helping them establish their style. But our ultimate goal was what we see here, was to be able to plot out the pathway to purchase so we could learn where it is that we need to interject ourselves in that pathway to influence them to purchase an FFO home. And what was interesting was the ability to see how many times they measured. And this was the predominant pathway. There was another pathway was I woke up on Saturday morning and I went shopping and brought home a couch. That was a pathway. But the predominant pathway was what we see here. They assessed their space. They went for inspiration in those sources we just saw. They looked for, this was a value retailer. It was not high-end furniture, so their customers typically were looking for discounts and sales. Then they moved into websites, visited physical stores. They tended to want to touch it, feel it, see it with their own eyes. Then they would measure again to make sure what they thought worked, and they'd buy it. And based on price, style, delivery. And so again, we knew that we needed to have our physical stores right and make the experience there. And we learned in the process we were missing some things there. We learned in the process our website was not doing a good job of converting people into the stores or into purchase. And so there was a lot of learning around the website and changes to the website that would make it a better catch basin to bring people to the stores or bring people on through the purchase process. So again, learning this pathway helped them make more money. And I wish I could tell you the sad news here. I wish I could tell you it helped them survive, but the pandemic, they actually died during the pandemic, and their stores were all sold off. So the pathway to purchase helped their bottom line for a while, but ultimately the pandemic and the lack of furniture purchase killed them off. One more piece we learned in this is how to better target. Again, this was all out of that same research project. We showed the different flyers from different furniture companies. And one of the easy, quick learnings they got was that the targeting they had and how they were laying out their flyer was just wrong. You can see the 4 different ones we showed. They had more pictures than just these. Then we asked them to describe these different pieces. And you can see what our FFO home described quite strongly on: low quality, cheap. We led those 2 categories. We led good selection, because if you look at ours, there's a lot of stuff on it. We led good value. We had some good prices. But when we got to high quality, we did terrible. When we got to furniture for me, we did terrible. When we got to stylish, we did awful. So what we learned by just showing the flyers was our flyer was all wrong. Our weekly circular was just wrong. And it wasn't reaching our target market. And so they were able to easily refine that piece. And again, attract more customers because they were using these flyers in the process. So research helped them add to their bottom line by seeing how to refine their advertising message and reach the customer. Another interesting, funny research story is we were testing some direct mail pieces. I will remember this to the day I die. It was in focus groups. And as we were doing the focus groups, they had a mock-up of a direct mail piece. And in this mock-up of this direct mail piece, they had a gentleman who had just stood in. He was not a model, but just in the mock-up, he just stood in. He was standing by a fireplace looking at some things. And it was all women in the focus group talking about this direct mail piece. And one of the women finally says, you know, he doesn't need to be gorgeous, but he needs to be attractive. And this guy's just not that attractive. So you need somebody else on your direct mail piece. And the hard part of this story is the person who was not a model, who stood in for the mock-up, was watching the focus group. I've wondered for many years now how he ultimately adapted to that. But again, funny things happen in research projects. You learn things you don't want to know sometimes, but you may need to know. How does it affect our market position? How does the media affect us? Alabama Power Company is a great client of ours that we worked with for many, many years. And we do a survey for them every quarter where we monitor what's going on in the market related to them and their brand. If you're doing a tracking survey like this, getting the questions right and getting it consistent and not changing it is absolutely critical, so that you have the ability to compare. Those 3 things I said: the questionnaire, the analysis, and the audience need to be consistent. And what this does is enables Alabama Power to measure where their brand is in the market. When stories come up in the media, how does that affect them? When things like the pandemic are going on, are people hearing the messages out there that they're putting out about deferral on bill payment and other things they're trying to do to help customers? It's able for them to test ideas and other issues that are going on and ultimately know what's happening in the market over time. It's the difference in a survey, which is a snapshot in time, to a video over time, as we can compare for now several years running what's happening in the marketplace. And it gives them the ability to react quicker and to know trends and to know things that may be affecting them. Probably have some thrift store shoppers in this group. We're actually towards the end of this project. This project hadn't reached its conclusion yet. America's Thrift Store, which is a chain of about 30 thrift stores across multiple states, is trying to identify. They've had a great run at growth. They've done a lot of work on their stores and on the product they sell, and things have gone well. They've recovered from the pandemic to a great extent. But they're trying to figure out, what do they do next? How do they continue to grow their sales and grow stores? So who is the new opportunity out there for them in the market? We had done some work for them prior to this, but we used focus groups to explore, to understand potential growth opportunities. We looked at different customer types, from those who are now disadvantaged due to the pandemic, to those who shop TJ Maxx, to competitors, to millennials with kids, millennials without kids, to Gen Z, to Gen Z no college. And we studied those groups through focus groups and the survey so we can understand which one has the greatest opportunity to convert into more thrift store shopping. To participate in the research, they had to be willing or currently shop thrift lightly, not heavily. And our goal is to turn them towards a heavier thrift store shopper. And we learned their motivations for shopping thrift. We learned their willingness to shop thrift. We learned their barriers to shopping thrift. We learned what's important in that experience. We learned perceptions of our own brand and competitive brands. And we've narrowed it down to a couple of targets, being millennials with children and Gen Z who haven't gone to college, or Gen Z who's not going to college. And we're looking at factors about the size of the market. Again, all those things I just said, their willingness, as we try to identify who is the best opportunity that we need to now market ourselves to, communicate to grow, now that we've done lots of work on our stores. So again, helping them bring money to the bottom line through research. One last example. How do we refine our message? If those of you who are from the state of Mississippi, you probably recognize that flag that you no longer have on screen. A business coalition in Mississippi about 18 months ago wanted to understand how they could affect the outcome of the vote, possibly, or the legislature, possibly, and the flag. They felt like it was hurting the economy of Mississippi to continue to have the flag that was there then. We set up focus groups to talk to the market and learned something that I kind of knew. And again, this was not long ago, and I've been doing research for 30 years. But we had African-American focus groups and we had Caucasian focus groups. We didn't think we would get completely clear answers from those two audiences with them mixed. We had an African-American moderate the African-American groups. We had me moderate the Caucasian groups. Learning number one was how important it was in this particular project to match the moderator to the audience. I heard things that made my skin crawl in my Caucasian groups, but I heard things that would probably have never been said to an African-American moderator in those Caucasian groups. By the same other side, we heard things in the African-American groups they would not have said to me. And I've moderated many, many groups with many, many different people type, but that was really important. And what our coalition learned was there were a couple of messages. If you took the groups out there, there was probably a 20% group that it did not matter. They were not going to change their minds. And there was another 20 to 30% group that hardcore absolutely thought it needed to be changed. Even if you just got rid of the flag and didn't have a flag anymore, change it. It was the middle that we needed to influence. It was the 50% of the people who didn't have a passion one way or the other. And what we learned is there were two messages that would help effectively change that group. One, the impact it was having on the bottom line of businesses in Mississippi, because people weren't coming to Mississippi for travel and other events and other things, companies that wouldn't locate there because of that flag. That was a message that influenced people. Secondly, letting people understand how the presence of that flag emotionally hurt some of the people who live in Mississippi and remind them of a past they didn't want to deal with. And that was your neighbor that it hurt. And that message about the emotional toll helped to convert some of those people. And that's how we identified the message that affected the outcome here. So sometimes we get to do projects on new products. Sometimes we get to do projects that have a greater good. What's the changing landscape around research? Pandemic changed a lot. For about 6 months, basically nobody wanted anybody's opinion. And it was hard to do research. We've done in-person research for many years. Taste tests went away completely. Focus groups in person were gone, and to a great extent weren't being done. Mock trials ended. Exit interviews weren't happening. So if you go back to what I said we did in the beginning, you took away a lot of our work. We began to transition. We had done online focus groups in the past. Focus groups began to transition into Zoom. I looked at many platforms. Zoom works great for focus groups. As I said earlier, telephone contact rates improved significantly. People are home. In the early days of the pandemic, it was the easiest I've seen in 20 years to get people to talk. And then slowly clients have begun to come back. Really interestingly, in-person focus groups and focus groups have exploded in the past 30 days. It really sat for a year with very few being done. So we're back. I did in-person focus groups yesterday, in fact. We're doing things to keep people safe. We're not trying to be blind to things, but it has begun to shift back to the way it was before, which for us is really good. What are industry shifts? When I started in 1990, we actually had people who went door to door, knocking on doors, doing surveys. That's been gone a long time, but that just tells you how far it has gone. If you are old enough, you may remember hanging out in the mall and people were in the mall with clipboards and they would do surveys. To a great extent, those have gone away because online surveys have overwhelmingly shifted to mobile devices as opposed to even online on a desktop or laptop. The internet's significantly changed research in Facebook, and it's changed how people advertise. When you're developing an ad campaign and you're spending a lot of money on creative, it is important to test that creative. If you're developing a small ad that doesn't have a big budget to simply put on Facebook or put online for a short amount of time, you probably aren't going to test that ad. So that's an impact from the internet, and then you can get stats from Facebook and others to understand some of the analytics and how things are being received and how things are being looked at. So that's impacted research. Sentiment analysis, so you can analyze what's being said about you on the internet, is a way that the impact is significantly impacted, and you can see how your brand is faring on the internet. Alternative intelligence is beginning to impact where we may be able to do surveys without having live interviewers, but it sounds like a live interviewer asking questions. And in the analysis side, privacy is growing more and more important. That's the shifts we see happening now. And what we do with all this data we collect on people. You have to beware heavily on cheaters. And that is when you post your survey to Facebook, you do a Google survey. There are a lot of people out there that will jump in there and speed through the survey in 2 minutes just to get to the end to get the prize, if they will, the benefit of the survey, the $2 you may get paid or the prize you get registered for, or they will get in there and do it just out of meanness. And so you have to have tools in place to watch for those things when using any online survey methodology. But ultimately, I don't believe you will replace the need for face-to-face research, getting to know your customer, getting to know your prospects, getting to know lapsed customers, and understanding their needs. So the bottom line is, what does research do? If you see our cute little kitten, research gives you the confidence to feel like you're a lion at times when you're really just a little kitten. And at the bottom line, research can give you confidence to move forward. You will sometimes know what you've learned in research, but now you really know it and you can move more confidently. So, one of our favorite quotes from Albert Einstein, you can't solve current problems with current thinking. Current problems are a result of current thinking. So I believe research helps shift your thinking along the way. Any questions?
So far, we haven't had any put in the tab. If y'all have questions, please put them into the questions tab. I did type in my answer for the Titanic question. I said overconfidence.
That would be true. And they also said God himself could not sink this ship. So what are the other answers? Because God proved he could.
Yeah. Well, lots of great information in there. Again, we will be sharing recordings of all these sessions after the conference is over. And I guess that will wrap this session up.
Right.
We definitely have your information. We'll have it on the website and share that out as well.
Great.
So,
Thank y'all.
thank you.